they are much better for our type of filmmaking with ancient archaeological sites, because usually there's nooks and crannies and stuff, and the big drones can't get in there. But with the little drones, you can actually release them. Also, they fly a lot longer because they're not using so much battery juice.
Yeah, for the powering away. And like me, you wouldn't crash them into tunnels when you're trying to drive them through, like I did last week. Like I did last week.
You do crash them. You crash them a lot, and you do lose quite a lot of drones when you go on expeditions. But I mean, that's just the name of the game.
Yeah.
That just goes with the territory. There's no way you can get around it. But now what we've got is we've got this new generation of crawler. These are micro crawlers, and they are all-terrain robots. They don't use caterpillar tracks. They've got like 6 legs.
Spider legs.
They're like spider legs. They're very, very tiny. They're very lightweight. They're very, very economical in terms of their battery juices. And really, basically, we've had a huge number of fantastic, mind-blowing discoveries in Mexico using a combination of the micro flying drones, the micro crawlers, and then there's these hybrid bots as well. Wow. They're crawlers, but they can also take off and fly. And then they can land and crawl and then fly, land and crawl and then fly. So this kind of technological advancement has already, I mean, talk about the textbooks having to be rewritten. What we have in Teotihuacan is we have a time capsule that's now been excavated. It's in a tunnel. It's underneath the Pyramid of the Sun.
Sure.
And it is a time capsule that was placed there. We think at the moment that it was placed there by the Aztecs. And you have objects that have been placed there which span a time frame all the way from the Upper Paleolithic, wow, all the way up to the point where basically the Aztec Empire was, really basically finished off, invaded, it was corrupted. I mean, you've got 3 great phases in the recent history of Middle America, Mesoamerica. You've got the Aztecs, the Mayans, and the Olmecs. Mm-hmm. The Mayan, that is such a tragedy because the Mayans, they had a language, they had the hieroglyphic writing system, and essentially they were all murdered. I mean, we're talking about genocide of the Mayan culture by the invading Spanish and by the invading Portuguese. Mm-hmm. Essentially, if they spoke Mayan or they were caught writing Mayan hieroglyphs, they were killed.
Yeah. What about, they were also conquered by other, like the Toltecs, they came in and they pretty much subjugated, I think they subjugated them, and somehow they get branded as the baddies where their ritual of sacrifice, but that may have been an influence from Toltecs.
Oh, I mean, you can see in Mel Gibson's film Apocalypto that there was a huge cachet in going off and capturing, people, enslaving them, and we're talking about blood ritual cultures. Mm. All right, and that's why I did actually start the show talking about voodoo, because voodoo, shamanism, and blood ritual, even though this is a subject which you rarely see any reference to it in any of these museums, we know now that the Aztecs, the Mayans, and most probably the Olmecs as well, these are life force, blood ritual based shamanic cultures. And what we find with the time capsule that's been discovered in the tunnel is artifacts that go way back to the Upper Paleolithic. For example, flint spearheads, which are Stone Age implements. These are mixed in with really finely carved limestone and granite statues of individuals that look like sitting Buddhas. They have oriental features. we can see over and over again with the Olmec culture, which is a culture that it was really at its zenith point around 1600 BC. We can see that there are African Negroid facial features with the large Olmec stone heads.
Oh, yeah.
But at the same time, the smaller Olmec statues and the Olmec masks, which are made from jade, are more Polynesian, Oceania, Japanese, Chinese in terms of their facial features. And so this time capsule, which we believe has been put together by the Aztecs and placed under and buried deliberately underneath the Great Pyramid at Teotihuacan, is really the Aztecs' way of, like we make time capsules to this day. I mean, there's modern time capsules being made right now. There's several companies around the planet, and they've made a time capsule that's, it spans 22, 23, 24,000 years.
Wow.
And this has been found using these tiny, tiny robots. The most successful robot is called Tlilok. Tlilok.
That's T-L-A-L-O-K?
T-L-I-L-O-K. And that's a crawler. But there's also these micro flyers as well, these micro drones. And then, like I say, we've also got these hybrid ones now. They look like little motorbikes, but they've got propellers on them. And, like I say, the smaller they are, the better they are for getting through nooks and crannies. So that is really, I mean, this is breaking news. I mean, this is really what's coming out of it. There are so many artifacts. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of artifacts that are being dug out and detected by the micro rovers at the moment that, I mean, you could fill a small to medium-sized museum with the amount of artifacts coming out of this time capsule.
This is incredible.
There's crystals, there's stone axes, there's jade axes, there's Buddha-like figurines, but, and this is really, really super, super, super important. Let me just have a look at my notes here, because some of the Mexican village names are very difficult to pronounce. So I want to get the pronunciation right. Is it at Tlilapia? Hang on, let me just see.
The pronunciations of the names are crazy. But
they are. The spellings are really crazy as well. There is one place here. It's not Izapa. It could be Tlilapia. I've got it in my notes here, but basically, this is the big thing that I've discovered just recently, and I was speaking to the anthropologists and the archaeologists yesterday.
Chris, I'm looking at pictures of some of this stuff here online, and I'm telling you, I'll try and superimpose them in the video, but it's just amazing. This stuff.
Oh, it's the most
dug out of the ground. We kind of think that where it's all done and it's all been dug up, but I mean, so basically, this stuff is underneath the. This is underneath the site of Teotihuacan. So we're saying Teotihuacan was built much later than whatever this site was. This was an underground ossuary chamber offering ritual place.
Yeah.
Sealed off then like a time capsule. Like the megalithic chambers, they were sealed off after their use.
Yes.
Like a little time capsule, then built the pyramid over top of it.
Yes, that's right. I mean, I think that I'm making this new film, Spirit World, which I've been working on for 3.5 years, by the way. I mean, I want to say this to the listeners and the viewers, that if you want to make a kind of cinema documentary and you want to travel to a lot of these places, I mean, this is not something that you make overnight. It takes a lot of time.
If you had all the money in the world, Chris, it still takes you physical amounts of time and planning and organizing.
Yeah, and also, like with the drone technology that I was mentioning, we have had, over the last 4.5 years since I've been making this movie, we have had one kind of giant digital revolution after another, after another, after another.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, now I'm shooting on HD micro cameras. Mm-hmm. I mean, they are about the size of, like an AAA sized cylinder battery.
Wow.
And they are giving me 1080 HD.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and they're running from the flat round batteries that you put in LCD watches.
Button cells.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, well, they weren't around. Those cameras weren't around 2.5 years ago, and they certainly weren't around when I started making Spirit World Volume 3.
Yeah.
And then with all the drones now, I mean, we've now got these new hybrid drones which fly and crawl. These are brand new out on the market.
The drone technology, as great as it is, we're going to be under attack with that pretty soon. As I know, one was taken down at Heathrow.
Yeah.
And I reckon, I know, where I live in Northern Ireland, it's a bit political here, but they don't want drones here either, trust me.
No, that's right. I mean, they're already, the Netherlands authorities are training eagles to actually attack drones.
That's incredible.
Yeah. But obviously, for ancient archaeological sites, as long as you've got the permission, you should be okay with them.
Okay.
But, the really big find, and this is the thing that yesterday I put a professor from the National Museum of Baghdad in Iraq in touch with a team member at Teotihuacan. Now, I met this professor from Iraq in the Pyramid of Menkaure in Egypt.
Wow.
And, to be able to put these people together, I think is the most important thing. Because it's not being done by standard academia.
Yeah.
Basically, these people are only comparing their notes and only finding out about each other's discoveries through me making my movie. And what we've found now is we've found Ogdoad clay figurines in Mexico, which are facially almost identical to what we have with the Ubaid culture, which is a famous culture that buried artifacts in a sacred mound of earth. And they were called the Ubaid people in southern Iraq.
You're the only other guy I know goes on about these all the time, because I'm talking the same. I know they're on your homepage as well. If you go to ChristopherEverard.com, the listeners will check it out there. But these are just mind-blowing.
They are,
weird, exotic, but they're some of the deepest antiquity of relics we have. I think 4,200 or 4,600 BC.
The Iraqi ones, they're around 5,000 years. I mean, the dates vary, and as we know, James, is that there are mistakes within academia. Okay, and I don't like the thing where people just. They write a textbook, the textbook goes into the curriculums in various universities, and that becomes the date set in stone, because we can see that these cultures don't arrive and then disappear in a spike in time. They overlap each other. They kill each other out. They're in competition with each other. Sometimes they join together. Sometimes they interact and mate with each other and create a synthesis culture, which we can't tell the difference of.
The complexities are mind-bending. We are a species that is extremely convoluted in everything we do, and it's never been any other way. And I don't know why archaeology's got to look back and give a very simple answer, a simple timeline or a simple set of events, when it never ever has been that way. It's not us. It's not the human race.
Yeah, I have to say, in the process of making my documentaries, I've got less and less respect for, traditional academia and traditional archaeology. There are museums which have artifacts on display, which are so similar to other artifacts on the other side of the planet, and also come from a very similar time frame, that it is a crime. It's a virtual crime that the curators have not done their homework, because now let me just explain the Ogdoad. The Ogdoad are the creator gods. They created through willpower, and the Greek word for willpower is thelema. They created the modern hydrocarbon society, which is the result of mankind. Modern Homo sapien man, Homo erectus, Neanderthal, Cro-Magnon, everything that you consider to be modern man and not a monkey was created by the Ogdoad gods in the legends which we find in the Temple of Unas near the stepped pyramid of Djoser in Egypt. That's where the first creation myths of the Ogdoad were recognized.
And that's that word again, Og, the Og, or the Og. It's everywhere. It's even in Ireland. It's even in Ireland, Chris.
Yeah, Ogdode, it's been named that because there was 8 of them. There were 4 serpent-headed females who have the bodies of human Homo sapien females, but with the heads of serpents. And they married 4 humanoid men, but those men have the heads of amphibian kind of frogs or salamanders. And so what they represent the 3 primary and most successful strands of evolutionary DNA: amphibian, reptilian, mammalian, all combined together. That's really what the symbology of the Ogdode are. And where they came from is a complete mystery. In the Egyptian legends, they were said to dwell in the ocean of Nun, which is the primordial soup, which is written into these ancient creation myths of Egypt. I mean, that there in itself is mind-blowing.
This is Gnostic teachings as well. This migrates into the Gnostic teachings, yeah?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's mind-blowing because, you know, modern science now recognizes that amoebas is really basically where we came from. We came from a primordial soup, and that is written into these ancient Egyptian creation myths, which are inscribed in hieroglyphs in stone at Saqqara.
Wow.
Thousands of years ago, they knew that we came from a primordial soup or a primordial ocean, which they called the Ocean of Nun. Now, the Ogdode gods, the 4 humanoid females with the heads of serpents and the 4 male humanoids with the heads of frogs, they somehow inhabited this primordial soup, or their souls inhabited this primordial ocean. And through their willpower, they created the first fully formed human, Ra, or Atan Re, however you want to pronounce it. And what happened is that through their willpower, they made this primordial ocean recede away, and a small, tiny hillock of dry land, the first dry land on our planet, emerged from this primordial ocean. And on that little piece of land, an egg appeared, a flower grew out of the egg, the petals of the flower opened, and inside the flower there was the first fully formed humanoid. That's basically the creation myth. Okay?
Wow.
Now what we find is that when we look at the Sumerian cuneiform and the Assyrian library of Nineveh, we can see that the Anunnaki are really, you can transpose the Anunnaki onto the Ogdode. You can see that there are massive similarities going on with the epic tales of Gilgamesh and the writings which were unearthed by Sir Henry Rawlinson at the Library of Nineveh. And all of that stuff, by the way, is in London. They actually brought back the entire temple room and rebuilt it at the British Museum, which is pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah, I've been to the British Museum in excess of 200 times. I used to go once a week for my... when I was on in the corner. And I have lots of it on film as well. I'm going to put that up on the channel sometime.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to be actually in the Pergamon Museum in Berlin next week as well, Chris.
Yes, they've got a great collection as well.
And I just came back from the Louvre in Paris, and between those 3 museums, they have massive chunks of Sumeria. In one
they do, yeah.
In one respect, it's great that it's preserved. It is.
It is really, because, we've had this incredible situation with ISIS or whoever they are. I mean, I don't believe that, ISIS really does exist as the way the mainstream media tells us they exist, but they've been defacing the winged bull statues. They're called Shedu. And Babylon, the word Babylon means gate of the gods. And, the big cities in Sumeria or Mesopotamia had these Shedu, winged bull statues at the entrances of the big cities like Mosul, Basra, Baghdad. And, these things are being destroyed. They're destroying them because they're saying that the spirits, the jinn, actually live inside them, which I can well believe. But, that's a job for an exorcist, not for a bloke with a Black & Decker power drill.
Sure. Before I don't want to lose your train of thought, by the way. In your book, Stone Age Psychedelia, Chris, you've got a whole chapter on the Ogdode and hallucinogenic magic. Maybe you just want to explain the hallucinogenic magic element to the Ogdode.
Right, okay. Well, communication with the Ogdode is the number one game in town for a lot of these cults, a lot of these secret societies. The most famous network of secret societies or brotherhoods, which we had, that were trying to make contact with the Ogdode all the time, are the pharaohs. The pharaohs, and I'm talking about dynastic Egypt, were using hashish, which was mostly coming from the area which is now called Lebanon. That was a very light-colored kind of sandy, fluffy type hashish, but they were also getting a more oily kind of substance from Pakistan, believe it or not.
Wow.
And they were also ingesting other types of resin that was being manufactured in Syria. So they were eating cannabis resin. They were also using opium, and all ancient cultures have been using opium. Opium has a history which goes back at least 5,750 years. The so-called incense burners that you see carved into the walls at the Palace of Karnak in Luxor, they are not incense burners. They are opium pipes. And not only can you see the opium pipes, and they look very similar to the ancient Chinese opium pipes, but you can see the vapors in some of the carvings coming out, and it's in those vapors that the visions of the gods could be seen.
Wow.
So they had cannabis resin, they had opium, and we also know that the Magi, who are in today's world the Bedouin and the Berbers, the Magi, who were like, in the legends of the Nativity, the three wise men, bringing myrrh and, all the gifts for Jesus. The Magi are the Stone Age drug peddlers of the ancient world.
Mm.
And you had obviously gold, and you had obviously turquoise, and you had obviously jade, and these valuable semi-precious and precious stones and metals in the ancient world, no question about it. But when we really look at what people were really trading with currency and what was the goods that were traveling huge distances with the Magi trade routes, it was the psychedelics, the psychoactive roots, the psychoactive seeds like henbane, mandrake root, the fly agaric mushroom, which is the typical red and white toadstool that you see in Alice in Wonderland. This was the main game in town. You could have as much gold as you wanted, as much turquoise and as much jade, but that would not give you the psychoactive telepathic effect of being in this psychedelic hypnotic trance. And that's what these brotherhoods wanted, and that's what they did all the time. And they were using a huge number of different plants. Syrian rue, which is an analog and is very similar to ayahuasca.
Ayahuasca, yeah.
Yeah.
I think they actually make a brew out of that in this part of the world, Chris, and they call it anahuasca. Yeah, they use the Syrian rue as a derivative for the DNA.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Syrian rue, it's a two-part thing. It's an MAO inhibitor. It's a two-part thing. It's exactly the same as they use Psychodria vigris along with ayahuasca and tobacco leaves in the Amazonian region to actually create a catalytic kind of process that allows the DMT to last in the body, because otherwise, if you don't do that, it just gets digested. The same thing was going on in the Middle East.
Wow.
Exactly the same thing. Now, if you take a look at you really carefully look, and you go to the National Museum of Cairo, or you go to the Luxor Museum, take a look at the eyes in a lot of those solid gold death masks. The Egyptian elite were employing high-level priestesses and priests. These people were permanently on a whole calendar kind of schedule of feasts, rituals, and ceremonies. And at every single one of these ceremonies, there would be a ritual which would involve psychoactive plants, psychoactive incenses, opium, hashish, tobacco, and we know, and you can see this in my book, Stone Age Psychedelia, we have absolute incontrovertible proof that the pharaohs, especially King Ramesses II, was ingesting cocaine.
Mind blown.
Yeah. Now, the cocaine plant and the tobacco plant, there is no botanical, historical evidence of those plants ever being in the Middle East. So we know that there were trade routes between North America, which is where the tobacco has been used by the Hopi, Cree, Apache, Blackfoot, all of those indigenous North American tribal nations use a combination of tobacco and sage as part of their form of shamanism. When you go further south and you go into Mesoamerica, you then start getting into countries like Colombia and Peru, and that's where the coca plant, the leaves are chewed, and that gives you this staying power and the wide awake kind of attitude which is necessary for these long rituals. Those plants were taken to Egypt for sure.
Yeah, okay, so they're indigenous to South America only, but that implies, well, either the South Americans went to Egypt or the Egyptians went to South America, or there was a trade route where they got passed along A, B, C, D, and whatever got to there. But most likely, I think there was transoceanic contact. We have many other examples, like you say, the statues, different parts of the world all linking up. You have Brazilian, Phoenician writings in Brazil and stuff. Maybe the Phoenicians, the Phoenicians were importers.
Well, the Phoenicians, we know that the Phoenicians and the Assyrians, they monopolized cannabis resin trading all the way over the ancient world. I mean, they were trading up into the Adriatic, Albania, Greece, Macedonia, Italy. The portion of the south of France where I live actually was under the control of Italy. Actually, it wasn't France. That's a recent kind of political development in the last couple of centuries. But that cannabis resin, and also the fluffy dry stuff from Lebanon, that was being traded all over. And then from the Celtic Empire, we had mandrake and henbane. A very, very difficult plant to cultivate, by the way, mandrake. It's incredibly difficult, but it's in the Book of Genesis. The very first thing that you read in the Book of Genesis is that mandrake was being taken as an aphrodisiac.
Wow.
Now, the Book of Genesis, with the whole story of, God said then there was light, and then he separated the waters from the heaven, blah, 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 blah. That is based on the ancient Gilgamesh epics from ancient Sumeria or ancient Mesopotamia.
It's one of my favorite epics, actually, that and the story of Utnapishtim, and it's just some of the stuff in the Sumerian records, the quote mythologies. It sounds wild, but
Yeah.
This stuff may be in fact, for all we know. It's just a label. Mythology is just a label.
Yeah. Now, if we want to talk a little bit about the Anunnaki and the genetic manipulation of humankind and the creation of humankind, what I mean by that is the basic genetic building blocks of the very, very primitive man, sorry, I have trouble with some of these Latin names, Australopithecus.
Yeah, understand, bro. It's the
yeah, these are the African skulls. They've only been found in fragments. They're very, very thick skulls. They are more advanced than a chimpanzee skull, more advanced than a gorilla skull, but they're not so thin and as evolved as Cro-Magnon. And so that is a branch of half man, half monkey, which died out or was killed off. And we can see these being dug up in South Africa. Okay, they probably exist in Australia as well, but that's another thing. Now, what we can see is that all of a sudden there is this massive, inexplicable jump, like somebody's got into Doctor Who's TARDIS, and we've gone from monkey man to virtually modern man in the flick of an eye. And this is still inexplicable. It's still something that the official textbooks from academia dodge this subject.
Yeah, it's like we have this compartmentalized research of our history and culture, and it's all, this is taboo and this one isn't, but it's still in the record. Yeah. You can ignore it all you want. There's some really weird stuff in a record, and it's like we have this ostracization of our history where, oh, I don't like it, stick a head in the sand. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, this hole, or this gap in the evolutionary story of mankind is filled as long as you start taking into account the Ogdode, as long as you start taking into account the Anunnaki and the advanced beings like Quetzalcoatl coming from nowhere, or the Viracocha who appear from nowhere, or the great teacher, the great Wangina in the Aboriginal Dreamtime mythology. They came from nowhere. They knew about mathematics. They knew about astronomy. They knew about astrology. They knew about textiles. They knew about weaving. They knew about cultivating wheat, barley, other grains. They knew about making poultices. They knew about psychoactive herbal concoctions like ayahuasca, like Syrian rue mixed with mint. These great world teachers, the nomos, they go under many, many different names in many different cultures. They plug this gap in the evolutionary timeline. But traditional academia is, in a controlled environment. It's under the control of universities, university dons. A lot of them have been members of these brotherhoods and sisterhoods and Freemasonry. And what I'm talking about is what people pay thousands of pounds to learn when they get initiated into witch cults, Masonic brotherhoods, and other kind of weird cults.
I'm glad you mentioned the nomos there. I just want to bring in the work of Shannon Doherty and Laird Scranton, both Dogon researchers, and they talk the Dogon culture in Western Africa. They talk about the nomos being their semi-aquatic fish gods, very, very like the Ogdode. These figurines and from the Ubaid, it's just the same kind of things, different ends of the earth and.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you've ever interviewed Shannon. She's very hard to get a hold of, and I don't think she does many interviews. But she has produced a prolific body of research, as has Laird. And Mr. Laird Scranton is coming all the way from New York to Avesbury. We're going to do a conference there. And that's on the Megalithic Odyssey I was telling you at the start of the show, Chris. So I'm really excited about that. I hope you're going to come to the event anyway. You have an open
Is it August the 20th?
August 20th, yeah.
I'm actually going to be
probably somewhere else in the world.
I'm going to be filming. I'm going to be doing a whole load of filming about the Knights Templar at that time, the whole of August, because I'm doing this film about the Baphomet, which is, this being that was worshipped by the Knights Templar.
Yeah.
So I've put August aside to get that film done.
I've got an interesting thing for you. I'll share with you off air, Chris. You're going to love it.
Okay.
Because nobody else in the world has it, and you're going to be given it for free. So, because I want somebody to do something with the research, and it's a bit bizarre to say the least.
Right.
To say the least, and it'll probably fit in with that little bit of filming. But I wish you. Where are you going for that, by the way? Where's that on the?
I'm going to be filming in Andorra, in Spain, nice. In France. I'm going to be filming in Sardinia, and also northern Italy as well.
When are you in Sardinia?
In August. I don't know exactly which day, because I'm going to go in my Range Rover and go on ferries.
Oh, nice. If you're in early August, let's meet up. Otherwise,
yeah, I like Sardinia. I think it's an amazing place.
I've been there. I think I've discovered some hypogeums there. They're off the beaten track. They're just left open to the elements. They're like the
hypogeum. Oh, that's great. Well, I'm going to be taking my Range Rover, so if we meet up, we can drive everywhere.
We've got to do some exploring together, bro.
Yeah, absolutely.
In Sardinia, I found there was a acoustic reverberation of about 7 seconds in there, and they've cut the same acoustic doorways as they did to the entrance to the temples in Malta. It's very, very similar stuff. Absolutely amazing.
Wow.
Sardinia is untapped. I'm hopefully doing a tour there this October, but in terms of megalithic, it's on steroids. The Naraji Towers are like a mixture between a castle and a megalithic monument. But they're not castles, but they're like just insane. Some of the constructions over there are absolutely jaw-dropping. And Sardinia, I don't know if they appreciate what they have, or it's a very, very poor part of the Italian Empire.
Oh, tell me about it. I was actually going to move to Sardinia about maybe 15 or 20 years ago. This is, just at the point where the internet was starting. And one of the things that made me not go there is because it was so primitive.
Yeah, they're so back.
And it was one of the last places where we had really fast Wi-Fi.
Yeah, the roads, networks over there are so...
Oh, man, you can't go anywhere in a normal car, really.
Yeah, it's
well, you can nowadays, but 20 years ago, yeah.
Not even now. Some of the roads we went down, it was just nothing but pothole. They weren't even roads, they were like tracks. They're like something you see in Peru or something. And this is European zone. This is the Eurozone.
Yeah. I have to say that, I think even Austria was considered a third world country right up until 1969. Because their economy had been damaged, by a history of Hitler and all this kind of thing. Europe, it's only in the last 10, 12, 15 years that it's become modernized.
Yeah, well, that's true. And with respect to Sardinia, I think they're sitting on a gold mine as well, Chris. I think they are just literally, sitting on a gold mine of megalithic. And Corsica too, about some of the best megalithic stuff that we have. Because I think they morphed and they changed, just like the Irish stuff over here. Some of the oldest stuff here is 5400 BC in the northwest of Ireland. But then we had a wave of 3500 to 3000 BC. And then it kind of phased out about 1000 BC. But in Sardinia, again, they have some really deep antiquity stuff, neighbouring Corsica as well. And it morphed into the Naraji civilization right into the Bronze Age. And it just kind of kept going, where other megalithic cultures kind of died out in pockets. Yeah. It just kept going. And the artistic display that they have over there, they have everything from the rock art, figurines, the Naraji artifacts, rock-cut tombs, although they were probably acoustic chambers, hypogeums. The Narajis are a special type of megalithic monuments with holy wells, with like moon alignments coming into them. It's insane, the stuff over there. Yeah,
I think the other thing is the reason I chose August is because there is a ferry connection to Corsica. And you can't get, that ferry doesn't run in the winter.
Make it early August and I'll team up with you, bro. We'll get the megalithic Odyssey road crew over there. We'll do something if we can.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go, by ferry, like I said, but I'm going to go via Corsica. So, I mean, Corsica is still a place which I need to explore.
This is a major part of the puzzle there, Chris.
My favorite thing is just walking into one of these little village museums
exactly.
and discovering stuff that looks like, identical to something like from ancient Iraq or something like that.
Up in the northwest near Alghero in Sardinia, there's a museum called the Sana Museum. SANNA. If you get there, go in and take a chance. I actually walked into the wrong building. It was the Department of Justice, and they had like metal detectors and like machine guns and stuff like. And I was like, I was going in with my camera equipment, and they let me through. And then I said, "Which way is the exhibit?" And they went, "Oh no, this is the Department of Justice. So it's right beside each other. Don't get confused."
Wow.
But anyway, the Sana
is it the museum?
Sana Museum, yeah, it's incredible. So. Why it's not in the capital Cagliari, I don't know. They just kept it a little made. So there's a big chunk down there too. But the Sana Museum has a weird skull in there from where the rock cut tombs were, and it's got it's been operated on with trepanation.
Oh yeah,
and it's got a weird shape to the back of it. It's just like, and it's unusually small as well. But it's like bulbous. It's like a wide wedge shape at the back. I wouldn't call it It's kind of elongated, but it's definitely not really like us. Very, very unusual shaped skull, and it's been trepanized. It's been operated on.
Wow. Yeah, that's like the caves of Shanadar in Iraq, because, we've got elongated skulls. This is in my book, Stone-Age Psychedelia, but they also operated on whoever, they operated and the person carried on living because the bone healed after the hole had been drilled into their skull.
Wow.
Iraq is just full of these amazing things. The famous skeleton called Nandi, that's its nickname, actually has a withered arm. Now, but continued to be looked after by this community at Shanadar. Not only that, when the person was buried, they buried them with flowers. And outside the caves, they had their own medicinal garden full of ephedra and other herbs used for healing. So we're dealing with a situation right now where the traditional idea of the Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon being idiots with clubs is totally out the window.
Yeah, I know. They have this stupid picture painted for so long now. People just aren't buying it, Chris. They're not having it. They're not buying it. They don't accept it. They know it's not adding up. I mean, you wouldn't have to be too awake to realize that anyway. But I think the internet age is caught up. People can't get away with anything anymore. It's out on the internet before it's out and don't believe what you read on the TV anymore or see on the news or whatever. It's just who goes to the BBC and stuff for the news anymore. I don't know.
I did watch one of their prehistoric blockbuster documentaries about a week ago, and I was just utterly disgusted with it.
Yeah.
I mean, the people who are making these things, these documentaries, have an agenda, and they're colouring modern society into the storyline which should be based on archaeological evidence. The BBC tack is to now say that if it hadn't been for psychopaths, modern man wouldn't have survived.
What?
Yeah, and if it hadn't been for cannibalism, modern man wouldn't have survived.
That's insane.
Well, if you think about it, if everyone was a psychopath and everyone was eating each other, we wouldn't be here now, would we?
Wouldn't be much of us left. Pardon the pun.
This idea of cooperation and especially psychoactive, psychedelic, trance, self-induced hypnotic communion with spirits is so far off the official agenda. They never go there.
Yeah. Chris, we're just at the top of the hour. I'm going to take a little break there for 5 minutes and we'll be back with the second half of the show. We're going to get into more. We didn't get through half of the update, so I've got to come back in on that. And I just love the conversations with you, Chris, because they just go where they go. And I know you're a deeply intelligent guy and you research many things. That's why I love the conversations with you. And it's just like a discovery as well as an intellectual discussion as well. But take a break there, Chris. We'll be back in just a moment. Hi everybody, welcome back to Capricorn Radio TV. This is your host James, and super excited with today's guest. It's always great talking to Mr. Christopher Everard. You can check him out on his personal page, christophereverard.com, and you can check out his TV content on enigmatv.com. We're hitting everything today from ancient cultures, Sumeria, Mexico, megalithic monuments, Stone Age, psychedelia, and Chris's awesome book. I'm not sure if it's his latest book, but it's a very, very well researched and prolific book, as is Mr. Christopher Everard. And I just love the content, the way it's produced. It's well researched, well written, plenty of diagrams, images, and supporting context. That's always a good thing to read in a fact book. And Christopher does it really well. Christopher, are you back with me on the show?
I certainly am. Yep. My latest book is actually a digital book. It's called Star Gods.
Star Gods, sorry, that's right.
Because I do physical books, but I also do digital books with, electronic word search, and you've got page gesture swipes, and, because a lot of people, they want to have something on their iPad or on their iPhone while they go to work.
Because you're not limited by the images you can put in a Kindle book or something,
Well, there you go. I mean, I do a physical book for certain types of subjects like Stone Age psychedelia. And I'm doing another physical book now, which is really containing all of the new breakthroughs which I've had with the anthropologists from Iraq, speaking with the archaeologists from Mexico. Sure. And I do digital books all the time. So Star Gods is my last digital book, and it's a kind of bestseller. It's a digital bestseller.
We've got to meet up at some point to discuss some of that for Megalithic Odyssey documentary, Chris. It's just a matter of when we meet, not if we meet.
Yeah, well, Star Gods is more about the Venus goddess statues, which have been found all over the planet. These are very strange little figurines. Most of them are only the size of your hand. They are female figurines. They have oversized breasts and very wide hips. But what's really interesting is they don't have any hands. They don't have any feet. The arms are usually short stubs, and a lot of them don't have any heads.
Wow.
And the oldest one is 13,300 years. That was found in a river in Morocco. But they are actually being found now in Japan, and this is a very, very important kind of discovery.
The diversity of where these things are. Is there not one in Vienna a lot older than that?
Yes.
I've seen one in the Vienna Museum in Austria, and there's a security guard sitting with it 24 hours a day. That's how priceless. I'm serious. It's in its own cabinet.
A Venus figurine that's older than 13,000 years.
I think it's 30,000 something.
Possibly. Possibly
there is. Well, there's so many of them. Let me just Venus figurine.
There's more than 125 Venus figurines in various museums around the world.
The Venus of Willendorf.
Yeah.
Again, it's 28,000 BC. They reckon.
Oh, that's 28,000. Wow.
Yeah, but this is the thing. The time frames that these are all found in are like really large epochs and very, very diverse across geographic terrains. That it's just a double enigma.
Well, they are, but my book Star Gods really goes into it. And what these figures are is that they are figurines that commemorate the genetic engineering of these kind of broodmare humanoid figures. They are much better for our type of filmmaking with ancient archaeological sites, because usually there's nooks and crannies and stuff, and the big drones can't get in there. But with the little drones, you can actually release them. Also, they fly a lot longer because they're not using so much battery juice.
Yeah, for the power and the weight. And like me, you wouldn't crash them into tunnels when you're trying to drive them through, like I did last week. Them. Like I did last week.
You do crash them. You crash them a lot, and you do lose quite a lot of drones when you go on expeditions. But I mean, that's just the name of the game.
Yeah.
That just goes with the territory. There's no way you can get around it. But now what we've got is this new generation of crawler. These are micro crawlers, and they are all-terrain robots. They don't use caterpillar tracks. They've got like 6 legs.
Spider legs.
Yeah, they're like spider legs. They're very, very tiny. They're very lightweight. They're very, very economical in terms of their battery juices. And really, basically, we've had a huge number of fantastic, mind-blowing discoveries in Mexico using a combination of the micro flying drones, the micro crawlers, and then there's these hybrid bots as well.
Wow.
They're crawlers, but they can also take off and fly. And then they can land and crawl and then fly, land and crawl and then fly. So this kind of technological advancement has already, I mean, talk about the textbooks having to be rewritten. What we have in Teotihuacan is we have a time capsule that's now been excavated. It's in a tunnel. It's underneath the Pyramid of the Sun. Essentially, they were all murdered. I mean, we're talking about genocide of the Mayan culture by the invading Spanish and by the invading Portuguese. Mm-hmm. Essentially, if they spoke Mayan or they were caught writing Mayan hieroglyphs, they were killed.
Yeah. What about...
Yeah.
They were also conquered by other, like the Toltecs. They came in and they pretty much subjugated.
Yeah.
I think they subjugated them, and somehow they get branded as the baddies where their ritual of sacrifice. But that may have been an influence from Toltecs.
Oh, I mean, you can see in Mel Gibson's film Apocalypto that there was a huge cachet in going off and capturing, people, enslaving them, and we're talking about blood ritual cultures. All right, and that's why I did actually start the show talking about voodoo, because voodoo. Sure. And it is a time capsule that was placed there. We think at the moment that it was placed there by the Aztecs. And you have objects that have been placed there which span a time frame all the way from the Upper Paleolithic all the way up to the point where basically the Aztec Empire was, really basically finished off, invaded, it was corrupted. You've got three great phases in the recent history of Middle America, Mesoamerica. You've got the Aztecs, the Mayans, and the Olmecs. The Mayan, that is such a tragedy because the Mayans, they had a language, they had the hieroglyphic writing system, and voodoo, shamanism, and blood ritual. Even though this is a subject which you rarely see any reference to it in any of these museums, we know now that the Aztecs, the Mayans, and most probably the Olmecs as well, these are life force, blood ritual based shamanic cultures. And what we find with the time capsule that's been discovered in the tunnel is artifacts that go way back to the Upper Paleolithic. For example, flint spearheads, which are Stone Age implements. These are mixed in with really finely carved limestone and granite